Welcome to the Job Matchmakers Podcast, where we share stories from employment consultants about supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to find employment in their communities. One person, one job at a time.
This podcast is produced by the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, a technical assistance center focused on expanding capacity for competitive integrated employment across Minnesota. We are your hosts, Sherry Healy and Brian Bajan, and we work at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to another episode of the Job Matchmakers Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk with Jill Eastman from our podcast partner, the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston.
Jill is a program coordinator for employment services at UMass Boston ICI. For over 35 years, ICI has provided employment services to support people with disabilities to achieve competitive integrated employment. Jill started as an employment consultant and now manages a team of employment consultants in the Boston area. Jill was awarded Job Developer of the Year in 2014 by the Massachusetts chapter of the Association of People Supporting Employment First, that's APSE. Jill has served on the Massachusetts APSE Board of Directors since 2017, and Jill earned her CESP in 2013. Welcome, Jill. Thank you for joining us virtually from Massachusetts. Can you tell us how you got into this work?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Brian and Sherry. I got into this work because I've been around disability my whole life. Before I was born, when my mom was just starting out in her career, she worked at a sheltered workshop when she was in her late teens, before she was even married. And when she worked there, she developed a relationship with a young girl with Down syndrome who had been, for all intents and purposes, given up to the institution by her parents. And my mother took her in and became her legal guardian. And so that preceded my mother's marriage to my dad and all of us kids. And so I grew up having a sister with Down syndrome who never made it to the world of competitive integrated employment. She worked in a workshop for quite some time, and I remember her bringing home paychecks, and I must have probably been, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, and looking at the paychecks, and they'd be for something like $4.79. And I remember asking, why is this so low? She talks about going to work, and for her, the workshop meant work. And she was really proud of what she did there. She was excited to go all the time. But I remember thinking, like, man, that is not equitable, not inclusive. And when I graduated from Boston University with a degree in sociology and thinking about a graduate track in clinical psychology, I really wanted to find a job in the human services field, working with adults with disabilities and helping them integrate into paid employment in the community. I just really felt strongly that it was important for self-esteem, for the community at large, for just value on every level. And so that's how I started in this work. And so it was one of my first jobs that I applied for after I graduated college. And I landed at ICI. And that was 24 years ago. My anniversary date at ICI, the Institute for Community Inclusion at UMass Boston, is on Halloween. And I just celebrated my 24th year there.
That's exciting. how long were you doing the work for before you earned your CESP? And can you explain to those who may not know what that is and what it stands for?
Sure. So I had been doing the work for about 10 or 12 years, I would say, before I earned my CESP, which um, stands for Certified Employment Support Professional. And I believe I was probably in maybe the second or third round of folks taking that exam. And it's a credentialing exam that professionalizes our field a bit for employment specialists. And it really focuses on best practices, making sure that we are focused on the human rights and dignity of the individuals that we're working with, that we have their interests and preferences and dreams and desires and talents and skills at the heart of what we're doing, and that we're providing person-centered services that are customized to, the folks that we're working with. And so it's a way to demonstrate knowledge of those research-based best practices, but also um, ensuring that we are consistently providing quality services to the best of our ability. And I think that it matters, right? It legitimizes our field. It helps in it helped me at the time feel confident in what I was doing, and how I was investing my time in terms of where I was working with folks out in the community, and how I was speaking with them, and giving folks obviously options, and making sure that they knew that they had options, and in terms of employment, and that, here in Massachusetts, we're an employment first state, and that employment should always be the first option for anybody who has those goals. So it was really exciting for me at the time that those credentialing options became available for our field. And I've encouraged my staff. I have a small staff that I work with at ICI in employment services, and all of us are CESP certified, which is fantastic. It just makes a whole host of difference when we are interfacing in the community with families, caregivers, employers, and individuals, and making sure that our services are the best quality that we can provide.
But also, to your point, I think individuals, employees feel that they're being invested in. If it's like, oh, my organization, my supervisor wants me to pursue this credentialing. And I think that that's an important aspect of professionalizing the field.
Yeah, I think so too. And really it empowers all of us in the field in a way that propels us forward. I think oftentimes employment specialists, the work that they're doing is very siloed, it's very individual, it's very oftentimes lonely. And I think those opportunities to connect through training, share expertise, and really feel that the organization that you're working for values your voice and your opinion and your um, contribution to the field can probably, I would venture to say, help with our retention crisis that we're having in this field in terms of retaining quality employment services staff, right? I mean, if we're not investing and demonstrating to our staff that they have value and that their voices are important and bringing them to the table in terms of goal setting and action planning, um, we're not doing our jobs as managers, right? So I think that it's all really important. And
I love how you have your hand in a lot of different areas within the employment field, and in talking about the training and the CESP and ACRE certifications, and how those strategies are reinforced. Those best practices are reinforced, and strategies that work are reinforced. Um, and I think that it like you said, just professionalizing the field, really recognizing that this work does have um there's a process to this, that there are best practices that have shown to be effective, and the more we can focus on following those best practices, the more successful we'll be in finding people employment in the community. So the story you're going to share with us today began on your first day as an employment consultant at ICI. Is that right?
It sure did. So my first day, like I said, was Halloween, 2000. And I was fresh out of undergraduate school, and I'm sitting at my desk on my very first day, and I am a fish out of water, and my phone rings. And I pick it up, and on the phone, I hear, "Hi, my name is Chris, and you're going to be my new employment specialist." And
Wow.
so, right out of the gate, I was ready to go. I thought that was really awesome because, you know, first of all, who does that? But secondly, um, that's the kind of passion and that's the kind of, initiative that really kind of sparks my attention and my, um, I don't know, my commitment. And so he drew me in that way. I mean, that was a hook, man. He knew what he was
Yeah.
doing, and it was really, and I said, well, fantastic. I can't wait to work with you. And that discovery process that we're talking about started right then, because what I noticed from that very first, very short phone call, um, was his voice.
Ah,
And
okay.
it had this rich intonation. Um, I almost could hear, I don't know. I could picture him doing voiceovers or something. But I thought, gosh, I can't wait to meet this job seeker, right? With a gumption and initiative to call me right up. And so that started our journey, which was a very long one, into employment.
Wow. But he was highly motivated. He was getting you on that very first day.
Sure was. And he hooked me right from the start.
I love it. Tell us more about how you started working with this, you said his name was Chris?
Yeah. And so he actually started working with our organization about 5 years prior. And Chris is somebody who he was born blind. He has pretty moderate um, cerebral palsy. He also has IDD. And Chris is somebody that, for various reasons, couldn't read Braille. And so, he relied and had lots of skill with um, using his voice, um, using the telephone. At the time, technology wasn't super advanced, right? So we were still, working on big old, computers that were, desktop computers, and we didn't have a whole lot of fancy technology. So he really relied a lot on the skill of his voice, and a lot of job development up until that point focused on, well, where can we apply this skill, right? And so, he worked, what I noticed in reviewing records and speaking with him and taking a look at his resume and talking to um, my supervisor and other folks that knew him well, was that he spent a lot of time job hopping from customer service or sales jobs. So, he worked for the local paper, doing, trying to sell the paper by phone, calling up customers. He maybe had that job for less than a year. Um, he didn't love he didn't love sales. He didn't love trying to convince people to buy things. He didn't like disgruntled customers. It didn't feel great to him. So, that was pretty short-lived. He also, had some volunteer work that he did with a local radio station that was affiliated with a local university. And so he would do some telephone fundraising for them. And he actually loved that because he was a big radio guy. And he knew all of the morning show hosts in the Boston area, right? And so he could interface with them and have a blast at these fundraising events, right? And so he loved that. But it was volunteer and they only happened maybe once or twice a year. He and so there was one other job that he had the most success at, and it was at the Epilepsy Foundation, where he would um call folks using technology, using a computer and a headset, and ask for donations of small household items or clothing that people wanted to kind of clear out. And so that was a little bit softer of an ask for folks, and
Mhm.
so he didn't get so many disgruntled customers or people hanging up on him and or anything like that. But he always came back to me to say, I really want to work in radio. I love music. I know everything there is to know about music. I really want to work in radio. Can we do this? And I thought, I don't know. Maybe. Um, and so I was like, tell me about what you know about music. And that was the start of a pretty long journey in terms of job development, but one that had an amazing outcome.
I think it's great that I really appreciate how you did not immediately dismiss Chris's um, idea to work in radio. I think at times it can be perhaps challenging as employment consultants to see, like, how do we break into that? There's certain fields that at least in my opinion, seem a little bit more challenging to break into. For example, folks who are like, I want to develop video games. That sounds like a really cool job that there's probably a long list of folks who want to do that. I actually, before I had moved into this role, I was at a transition school talking with students wearing my employment services provider hat and talking to them about what comes after school, both the importance of getting a job when you're in high school for no other reason perhaps than just to figure out maybe what you don't like to do, but then also be thinking about future jobs. And one person said, I want to be an influencer. And I thought to myself, employment consultants are really going to have to up their game on how to support this new generation of folks who want to be the influencers, want to be perhaps more involved in tech. Because I can say for me in the very talented employment team that I managed, I didn't necessarily have anybody who was immediately like, oh, I know how to break into the influencer game.
Well, sure. And that actually, is really pretty common, right? I feel like I have these conversations in staff meetings with my staff all the time. Um, how do we do that, right? Like if it's a field like that we've never explored, or if it's a field where it's a little bit more niche or the jobs are few and far between, right? How do we do that? I remember somebody coming to us, and again, not like the influencer track, although you bring up a really good point about how we have to up our game. And I like that because that, we constantly, um, as employment specialists, we can't rest on kind of our laurels, right? We need to be constantly following the labor market, figuring out what industries and jobs and tasks are growing, what unfortunately, some jobs and tasks fade away, right? And really make sure that we are learning as much about um, the up and coming industries as we possibly can. Um, I was going to bring up an example of someone that came to us that wanted a job in graphic design. And I know that I don't know a whole lot about graphic design, right? And my staff didn't either. And so, luckily at the ICI, we have a pretty robust marketing and communications team. And so I was like, excellent, community experts at my service. And so I was able to kind of um, not only have the job seeker kind of meet with each of them to review that person's website and their portfolio and their resume to sort of ask questions and give feedback, but also help inform myself and my staff about how to talk to people in that industry, right? And how to maybe get our foot in the door using strategies that we're not used to because we're not in that field. And so you bring up excellent points.
So Jill, this individual had been working with the team for 5 years and without success. What did you do differently that led to an opportunity that seemed to be a good fit for him?
Yeah, so we dialed it way back, first of all.
Okay.
I just started to meet with him to get to know him on a human level. That's always been super important to me because everybody is different. I really do kind of, and now I'm thinking about the Denise Bissonette video where she talks about um, peeling back the layers of an onion, right? And getting to the
Mhm.
to the core of kind of who a human being is in order to understand and help them sometimes understand where their passions lie. I don't know that anybody had ever really asked him
Mhm.
or ever really cared, to be honest with you. And I know that that sounds bleak, but unfortunately in this case it's true. And so I just started meeting with him. We would honestly, and I don't recommend this, but it was, of the times we would order a pizza to our office and um and we would sit and we would eat pizza and we would talk. And what I learned was that he could tell you anything there was to know about any music genre from the 1940s to now.
Wow.
Um, any song, any artist, if the song was remade and who remade it, what year it came out. I mean, I this gentleman had so much music. It was fascinating,
Wow.
absolutely fascinating. And he knew things about music that would be interesting to know. For example, he told me one time that, and I'm not going to butcher the music artist because I don't remember who it is, but he said at one point that the person that recorded the song Run Around Sue had originally thought to call it Run Around Roberta. But he said that didn't make sense. So he they changed it to Run Around Sue. And so I just thought that was really neat. Like, all of this stuff. This is cool. Where can we apply this? And unfortunately, at the time, things like podcasts didn't really, they hadn't really taken off yet. And, so we started with his contacts in the radio business. We started with those morning show hosts and talking with them about, whether or not he could come, tour the radio stations. We talked a lot about what the equipment looked like and whether or not, there would be opportunity there for Chris to work or to learn or to shadow. And he did that a few times, but there really, unfortunately, weren't a whole lot of opportunities at the time in radio. Um, And the environment was rather small. And what we found out was that kind of working all of the equipment wasn't a good match. Uh,
Okay.
and so we started to branch out and network with other types of artists that utilize music. So we found an organization called Potentials Unlimited. So Potentials Unlimited was a performance company that had people with disabilities as the performers. And it was run by two individuals who had a lot of contacts in the local area and um, served as almost a brain trust for us to brainstorm about different ideas and maybe opportunities to explore in the community. And so, um, in one of those meetings with Potentials Unlimited, Chris and I were thinking about what types of businesses, what types of organizations might want him to come in and either talk about music, maybe do music trivia,
Hmm.
or maybe do a DJ show. His major goal was to be a DJ.
Hmm.
Wanted to run his own show, and trying to figure out how to do that was a bit tricky. Um, we explored his community, which was outside of Greater Boston, and what we noticed when we were sort of mapping out, the businesses in his community and what that looked like was that there were several retirement type rest home facilities that were under the same organization umbrella. And we contacted them to see if maybe their activities department might want or need somebody to come in on a regular basis to provide musical entertainment for their residents. And we, before going in there, developed a proposal about what that might look like. So we really took our time to do some market research on, first of all, kind of the programming of activities departments, what types of entertainment or what types of activities do they bring in terms of outside entities, how much, would an entertainer make per hour, those sorts of things, how long the radio show could be, what it might entail. And so we drew up a proposal and we brought it to this company and they were excited,
Hmm.
but they weren't really sure how it would go or whether or not it would resonate with the residents. And so they asked if we'd be willing to have Chris perform a pilot show for
Oh.
them to kind of give it a shot to see if the residents took to it, kind of what Chris was all about, because we could hand them a written proposal. And again, at the time, their video resumes and visual resumes weren't quite a thing yet, right? And so,
Yeah.
we could show a picture, we could do all of these things, and he certainly had recommendations from, his jobs where he did well, especially the fundraising job with the local radio station. But you know, in order for him to really showcase his talents, people really needed to see that and kind of experience a show, and that's kind of fun, right? So, um, so we helped him do a pilot show. We had an amp and a microphone at ICI offices, and we worked with Chris to develop an iTunes playlist. Um, we put a little Velcro patch on the enter key on the keyboard so that he knew when to start and stop the music, so he could give like a little bit of an intro or an outro to the songs.
Wow.
And so really, and he took paratransit to get to the job. And so we would meet him there. And so for the pilot, he ran this pilot show and he rolled up in that place like a celebrity with his glasses on, his DJ hat, his equipment is ready to go. And he killed it, you guys. He nailed it. He played music from, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, early 80s. He was telling people facts. residents were grooving in their seats. Some were standing up,
Wow.
having a great time. And so when it was all over, the activities director came over to Chris and to me and said, I have not seen them move this much. This is fantastic. Can you come back? When can you come back? Would you like to sign a contract? And he was like, yeah, yes, yes, please. So he negotiated a job with them that was um on a monthly basis, but he traveled to several of those area rest homes and made $30 an hour performing DJ shows for the residents of these assisted living homes. And they loved it. One of the things that was really cool was that every month he would work with us. So support that we provided him was really quite minimal. He would work with us to tell us what the ideas were for kind of what set list he'd like to play, and he was very particular about he wanted it to be in chronological order, so he would start with the earliest earliest release music, and he would move forward in time, and so we would work with him to create that set list. He would memorize it, and we would meet him there and he'd be good to go. We'd set up the equipment, plug in the amp and the mic, and he'd be off and running. And one of the cool things he did on a monthly basis was at the beginning of each DJ show, he would sing happy birthday for any residents that had happened to have birthdays that month. At the end of every show, he would ask for song requests, which was really awesome because it was nostalgic, and people love music and they want to hear what they want to hear, right? So, you know, um, really working with the residents to provide them entertainment that was meaningful to them, was really important to Chris. And, he would curate some of the music, depending on what season it was, so for the summertime, there'd be a lot of Beach Boys and, there would be Monster Mash at Halloween time and, some, winter songs during the holidays. And so it was really cool. And like I said, the organization loved it because it boosted, positivity and fun and movement and singing and just general kind of socialization and camaraderie. It was awesome. They'd be kind of all scattered about, when Chris would come in to the building every month. And as soon as they heard that he was in the building, everybody would come out of their rooms, come in from outside, get right into the big activities room and be like ready to go. And literally the whole place would clear out and go into that one big room and
Wow.
be entertained for, a few hours from his DJ show. And it was awesome.
I love this story. I mean, when you talk about customizing a job that did not exist, you created a job, or
Yeah.
the proposal, putting the proposal together and then doing the pilot and immediately being able to showcase his skills and the way it was received by the residents and just a win-win all around. I mean, that is a great story. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. One of the things Chris said one time, we had he had agreed to do a video for us once, and at the end of the video, he says, "And I do what I love, and I get paid for it."
There you go.
And that's it in a nutshell. I
That's
mean,
it.
I even think he, got himself a girlfriend there. He was a local celebrity, and he renegotiated his contract year after year for about 15 years. And then unfortunately COVID hit. And so it wasn't an environment that was medically safe at the time. And so Chris was thinking about retiring anyway. He was of that age and really was thinking about winding things down in terms of work, but man, what a way to go out with 15 years of success, doing what you love, bringing joy and music to people in your community, and just, I don't know, he had a blast, they had a blast, we had a blast. It was a win-win-win all around.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it doesn't get any better than being able to say, I have my dream job. Not everybody gets that opportunity. So
No.
thank you for sharing, Jill. That's an awesome story. And so our final question that we ask all of our guests is, what do you want people in your community to know about employment for people with disabilities?
Great question. I'm going to make it a complicated answer, I think. For individuals with disabilities, I want you to know that you can work, you can realize and actualize your dreams. Let us help you do that. There are opportunities out there and you have value. So go for it. For employers, I want to merely state research and facts that say, you can increase your profit by 2 times if you're doing well with diversifying your workforce and hiring people with disabilities and tapping into that untapped kind of workforce. And for everybody else, I just want to, don't underestimate people. Everybody has value. Everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has a place in employment. And so if we can help you do that, we would love to.
Well said. Thank you, Jill, for joining us today and for sharing some of your experiences doing the work. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this episode. We hope you join us next time to hear another compelling story of one person finding one job in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Job Matchmakers podcast, funded by the Minnesota Department of Human Services. This podcast is a partnership between the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration and UMass Boston's Institute for Community Inclusion.
For more information on the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, visit our website, linked in the show notes. We're glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.